Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. Well, unfortunately, I'm not there. I wish I were. I love Calgary. And I really was honored for you guys to ask me to speak with you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, how I got here, what I've been doing through my professional career, and the importance uh, for me, to me, and my work, basically. So I hope you will enjoy this. I'm a little humbled by this. I hope everybody can see my screen now. If not, just let me know. So yes, my talk is a journey among the
Looks good.
stars. Oh, great, excellent. So my talk is a journey among the stars, bringing astronomy to the public. So, sorry, by the way, if you can hear a cat snoring, the whole virtual thing. Um, so I want to start by talking about how I got here. So here's a very angry picture of me in Italy. I was about 7 years old and probably angry because I had to wear a dress because I did not like wearing a dress. And look, it's the 1970s. It was with socks and sandals. My apologies. But one of the things for me that was really memorable at that time in my life was the fact that I went to Italy and I was, I'm half Italian. My father was born in Italy, and because I showed an interest in going in Italian in Italy, they decided, hey, why don't you go there? This is 1970s, put me on a plane by myself, and away I go. But I was very limited in my language skills with being Italian. And it was really hard for me. And my grandmother only spoke Italian, and I only spoke English. So you can imagine how difficult that was. But one of the things that stood out to me is I remember being really lonely, and I remember crying and standing out there on her porch. And one of the things, I was looking up at the moon, and my grandmother somehow managed to communicate to me that that moon was the same moon that my dad was seeing over in Canada. And that really brought so much comfort to me. So I really look at astronomy to this day as something that brought me comfort when I was away from home. And yes, I became very interested about a year after that when I saw the images coming back from Voyager and um, seeing Saturn. I've told this story before, and I'm sorry if everybody's heard it before, but um, I remember going out in the playground at my school in Toronto, and after seeing those pictures from Voyager and looking up at the sky, it was a cloudy day, a bunch of cumulus clouds out, and I was just staring at the sky. I remember it wasn't that warm. And a friend came over and looked at me and said, well, what are you looking at? And I said, there are planets up there. And she kind of looked at me like, all right. And she was like, okay, bye. And from then on, that was it. I loved astronomy. However, then I was in high school. That's me on the left there, um, and I kind of let it slip away a bit because it's high school. You're trying to fit in. You don't want to be, that nerdy person. Although that picture there, we're all nerds in different ways, but nobody really liked astronomy. However, around that time, it was about 1989. And that was when we had a really intense solar maximum, the Quebec blackout. And I remember that was the first time I ever saw the Northern Lights. My poor dog I was walking my dog, and I was looking up, and it's a little tiny little guy, Yorkshire Terrier, and a Yorkie. And I remember looking up at the skies. I'm sure we all do all the time, and we all did. And I remember being really annoyed that I couldn't see the stars because of these stupid red clouds. Oh my God, these red clouds. And then it twigged in, and I was like, oh my God, red clouds. And I'm just north of Toronto, like literally a block north of Toronto, the boundary. And I was seeing this incredible display display of the Northern Lights, and I ran into the house screaming, just going, "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!" And I really annoyed my family back then, and so that was really incredible. For a few years afterwards, that was really incredible. So it kind of reignited my love. And then I went into university, and I still loved astronomy, and I was very much, it was close to my heart. You know, I did all my astronomy using binoculars. I didn't have a telescope. But everything I remember looking at Jupiter and looking at the moons and being just so amazed. So while I was in university, I went into university with the goal, in journalism school, with the goal initially, I wanted to be a hardcore international reporter. And then I wanted to become a copy editor, because I was really good with language and grammar and spelling. And then along the way, I started collecting all this stuff, you know, all these amazing achievements that we were making. And this was in the 90s, and Mars was a very big deal. And we had Roberta Bondar, there's her signature on the right, come in to talk to us. I got her autograph, and I believe Ken Money as well. And suddenly things changed. I was like, you know, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I don't want to be a copy editor just looking at grammar and spelling. Maybe I want to do science journalism, which wasn't on anybody's radar at that point, not in journalism school, that's for sure. And we used to have we ran a newspaper. The journalism program had its own newspaper separate from the university. It's called the Ryerson. And I pitched something, and I said, hey, I'd really like to start a science beat and bring science to university students and astronomy to you know, our readers. And to my surprise, my prof said, yeah, go ahead. And so one of the first things I wrote about was Comet Hyakutake, because I could see it from downtown Toronto, which is just insane with the light pollution, as you all know. And then the other person I interviewed was Ivan Semeniuk, because Ivan was a huge reason why I wanted to become a science journalist. We had a TV in our journalism, in our newspaper office, I guess you'd call it, room. And we always had Daily Planet on. And I saw him and I thought, that's what I want to do. So Ivan Semeniuk was one of the first people I interviewed, followed by Roberta Bondar, who intimidated the heck out of me, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to a real astronaut, you know, and I was shaking. And that's what I decided I wanted to do. But, you know, life doesn't always go that way. So I ended up going abroad and then coming back and becoming a copy editor. And then in 2003, this happened. This is just north of Toronto. I was walking outside of my parents' home, which my mom still lives in to this day. And I turned around with my 3-month-old daughter. She's 20 now. And I turned around and I looked up, and that's what I saw. And I freaked out. I literally threw my daughter into my mom's arms with, you know, not the best parenting, image. And I was like, we have to take a picture. And this is on, you know, film camera back then. It's out of focus and fuzzy. As you can see, it's pretty low res. And I took this photo with the help of my father, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And that was it. Like, I thought, I can't believe I'm able to see this yet again. And I really, that was it. I was totally hooked. Life came along. I got divorced. I moved to Richmond Hill. And I moved to literally just around the corner from the David Dunlap Observatory, as I'm sure you are familiar with. The story, though, is that I moved there, was so thrilled, and then my mom said, hey, did you know University of Toronto is selling it? And I was like, what? And I was devastated. I thought, they're going to close it down. And then Paul Mortfield, as you can see the two bottom images there, happened to drive up. He was the past president of the Toronto Centre, and he wasn't at the time. And he said, hey, by the way, did you know that the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada is taking this over? And I was like, wait, what? And to me, RASC was like this high up thing with all these professional astronomers. And I was so intimidated, absolutely intimidated by the idea of joining. But Paul and I sat down and chatted on the steps for 2 hours, I think it was. I had never met this guy, and he was telling me everything. We had happened to view the Grimsby meteorite that exploded. I was in my apartment, and it lit up my entire apartment with lights on when this happened. And we just started chatting away. And he said, "You should join." I was like, "Oh," you know. He said, "Well, why don't you volunteer?" And I did. And I volunteered before I joined, and I was hooked. That was it. Sorry. I was absolutely hooked. And these are pictures of various things. Me strangling Paul. That was Halloween. We had a lot of fun at Halloween parties there. And I was so happy to be on that front lawn and to talk to people about astronomy. And guess what? If I didn't know something, I just said I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything, but I didn't know something. And it became a really important place for me and home. And to this day, I credit Paul Mortfield and the RASC for where I am right now, where I am in my life, because it absolutely changed my life. I started to write stuff for the RASC website. I ended up doing a bit of astrophotography, which I'll get into later, which remote astrophotography based out of Australia. And I ended up writing a blog for them. And it's all thanks to Paul, because he introduced me to astrophotography and to like all this stuff. And I don't know what I would be without it. And you know what? I'm watching The Mandalorian right now. So I just stuck that in right there. And I got to say, it's really funny. That telescope has been run by my daughter when she was 7. It's been run by my ex-boyfriend, by his daughter, who was like 6. I never touched the controls and to this day. And now I'm not involved in it. And I'm like, really? I didn't do that. But it was home to me. And it is a very, you know, the RSC holds a very deep place in my heart for where I am right now. And of course, along the way, I was asked if I was interested in becoming the editor of the journal. And I thought, sure, you know, I love astronomy. I was working actually as an editor, a children's book editor at Scholastic Canada, which parents will be very familiar with, or any of us growing up. And I said, sure, yeah, okay, I can do this. And I'm still the editor of the journal. And along the way, I ended up getting a job at Global News, but I left for a 1-year mat leave for a contract for CBC, because Global News had gotten rid of my beat. And I was absolutely devastated, because I loved talking about space, astronomy, science in general, because then my role was talking about weather too. I love severe weather. Calgary, you're all familiar with that. You know, my first day I wore my my nebula shoes, and the rest is history. And I am absolutely gobsmacked to be speaking to the public about these amazing things like the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST. And I mean, Hubble for me was huge. I remember one day lying on the sofa at home, and I discovered that Rogers, our local channel, it was News 10 back in the cable days, was airing the eyeglass replacement for Hubble back then. And somewhere in here, I have many video cassettes of that mission, because I slept on the sofa. My parents were actually in Quebec, and I slept on the sofa, and I recorded every second of that mission to replace the camera, or not replace, but fix it. And here I am talking about its successor, not its replacement, you know, JWST, and the amazing images that it provided us and continues to provide us. I mean, it's just really in its infancy. And I got to go cover Artemis. Now, the Artemis one, the return to the moon. I was very, very excited to cover this. I really had to push. I didn't have to push that hard, but I had to say, look, this is really important. Canada is involved in this. And so that's really been something that's been really near and dear to my heart, which is Canada's involvement in James Webb, for example. I recently came across, I did meant to include this in the slide. In 2012, I went to the Canadian Space Agency's Tweet Up, the Landing of Curiosity. And while I was there, we were on a tour, and I recently came across a picture that had a picture, or had a model of JWST saying like it's Canada's involvement, and that was in 2012. You know, along the way, too. I mean, after I graduated from Ryerson, just going back a bit, I went to SPAR, now MDA, and I was able to see the Canadarm, one of the shuttle Canadarms being refurbished. And to me, it's so important to stress Canada's involvement in space, in astronomy, because we really do amazing work. And I am really excited about promoting that. By the way, I wish I could be there because I want to know if everybody has seen that the CSA has a new logo. Not sure how I feel about it yet, but it is different. It is interesting in its time. It's due. So I'm really excited about that, and it's great timing because we are going to be announcing in April the astronaut who will orbit the moon for Artemis 2. My bet's on Jeremy Hansen. And we also have, I don't know if many people remember this because Artemis has taken center stage, but we are also going to be having an astronaut going to the ISS. So big time, like big stuff for Canada. And I'm really excited about promoting that and the work that is done. You know, one time I came across one of the scientists for OSIRIS-REx, and he said, you know, how do we get our news out there? How do we promote this? And I said, you just gotta tell us what you're doing, because he said to me that one time somebody asked him, "Oh, who do you work for?" And he said, "The Canadian Space Agency." And they said, "Oh, NASA?" And he said, "No, the Canadian Space Agency." So it worries me that Canadians don't know the work that Canada is doing. So unfortunately for Artemis 1, I was not able to see it launch because I was there for almost 2 weeks, and one delay after the other unfortunately prevented the launch, and then I was unable to attend the launch, but hopefully Artemis 2. Along the way, I have been very fortunate to meet some amazing people. Kip Thorne, pre his Nobel Prize, Jeremy Hansen. I have been following him since 2013. Yeah, 2013. He's very tall. Since he was announced as the next, well, the 2009 astronaut candidates and as astronaut corps. And I've been hanging around I mean, I can't believe this. If you were to tell me in university when I decided to start up an astronomy beat for university newspaper, excuse me, I would never have bet that I would be able to see these people. And Roberta, I consider her a bit of a friend now, which is hilarious. And it's only because we keep bumping into each other. We went to give a talk. Roland Shane can speak to this when we were in Fort Smith, and I happened to bump into her at the Edmonton airport. But I've like bumped into her on the street in Toronto. I've bumped into her at IKEA. And while I was there in Edmonton waiting to fly to Fort Smith, she said, you know, I was thinking of putting a restraining order on you. And she's amazing. She's honestly a credit to Canadians. But the other thing is I write books. Initially, I started off in hockey, old Canadian gal, because I was working at Scholastic Canada. They didn't have an editor. I was a really big hockey fan. So I did that. And then actually my first books that were published were on weather, Canadian summer weather and winter weather. And then I was approached to do Searching Beyond the Stars, which I will touch on later and which has been already mentioned, the science of song, which is not astronomy related, but it was fascinating for me to work alongside Alan Cross. It was his baby. I just wrote the words like he did it. He did all the research because it's amazing. If you don't know who he is, you really should look him up. He's big in Toronto. I don't know how big he is in Calgary or Alberta, but he talks about music history. And then I was approached, I was asked to do the Night Sky Almanac. And this is very near and dear to my heart. And again, I will explain a little more why that is. I mean, not that it shouldn't be anyway, but that's one of the big things for me. So that's my background. But as astronomers, one of the big things we know is the public and their belief in certain things, and specifically misinformation that's out there. It's not disinformation. I don't think people intend to provide, try to freak people out. Some do. But one of the big things for me, I have to say, is the supermoon. And perhaps some of you feel the same. But I had a real dislike of the supermoon. And I don't have a slide for that. I really should have. But like, why? It's the moon. But one of the things was, supermoon, supermoon, supermoon. I was at Global News at the time. And I was like, you can't tell the difference, like you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. But then one day I was walking on the street near home here, and these women came out of the store, and the moon was rising. It was perfect. Stonehenge was perfect down Queen Street in Toronto. And they were like, oh my gosh, look at it. It's the supermoon. It's amazing. I can't believe it. And I was just so touched by their excitement. And I thought, you know what? If the supermoon is going to make people look at the moon more, all right. So, I mean, I'm not a big fan still, but, let it slide because it makes people look at the moon. But that's where we come in, to say, you know what, this is actually something that was invented by an astrologer, not an astronomer. And you're hard pressed to tell the difference. But you know what? Here, and we give them information. So that's what our role is. So I don't want to just talk about my job or what I do, because we are all the same. We want to share our love and passion for the cosmos and educate people about it. And that's why I do what I do. And sometimes I really can't believe it, So let's touch on a bit of some of the misinformation things out there. Mars is going to be as big as the moon. I mean, how scary would that be, by the way? That's one that's been circulating since probably 2007. It's gotten less and less play over the years, which I'm really happy about. I think, can't believe I'm going to say this, but social media has actually played a good role, where people like us, amateur astronomers, say, guess what? That is not what it's going to be like. And you can say, you know what? You want to look at the moon through a telescope, which, by the way, one of the things I loved doing at the DDO was having people, or actually on my front lawn, is having my telescope set up and having people look at the moon and just seeing them step back and go, oh my God, you can see craters, you can see the topography. And that's what I think is amazing. So that's gone, hopefully a little bit. It'll come up, I'm sure, where we all have to step in. But the other one that I came across was this. And again, I wish I were there so I could get some interaction. But I don't know how many people have seen this. But this is an image of Earth, Venus, and Jupiter as seen from Mars. So this went around, and of course, we all know that's not the case. In fact, what this is, and people tried to figure out how this image came about, but it was through Stellarium, our beloved Stellarium, and it's just showing something through software that could potentially be. Of course, we know, looking at Mars photos, that the sky is very much faded and blue at sunset, which I think is amazing. But again, I really think that we have a responsibility as amateur astronomers to dismiss these myths and these falsehoods that circulate online. This one I came across recently. I followed this Twitter account, don't follow it anymore, and it was like astronomy pictures or something like that. And this came with a caption of, oh my gosh, this is a void in space where nothing exists. You could cross it for, I think it was 795 million kilometers and not encounter anyone. By the way, that is not 700. Anyway, and it was like, there's nothing exists in space. And I'm like, that's a Bok globule. So I literally, I tweeted to the account and said, no, this is not true. And I've seen a lot of other people encounter this as well. And this is, I think, kind of one of the newer ones that have circulated. This for me was probably a couple of years ago that I saw this. But again, and I think one of the most important things is for us as amateurs not to ridicule people, just to educate, to say, you know what, that would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? But that's really not the case. But this is the case. This is what it is. And I always turn to, truth is stranger than fiction. Because we don't have to make stuff up about our universe. Things are pretty freaking weird out there. Black holes alone, right? And time dilation. It's crazy. I mean, it's incredible, and we can teach people about this. So this is the most recent one. This has been driving me crazy over the last couple weeks. I guess week and a half. NASA tracking asteroid that could ruin Valentine's Day in 2046. This is from The Guardian, published, March 10th, last Friday. Funny enough, I happened to come across this before it was announced to the public because I subscribe to Minor Planet listing thing that a group that I get all the notifications, and I haven't, but I usually ignore them and delete them because I figure I'm not going to know that much about it. But after the asteroid that broke up over Toronto across the CN Towers, I bet you that was in that group. So now I've been paying more attention. And I saw this 2023 DW, and they were talking, the astronomers were talking very deep, way above my head, about tracking and saying, as we all know, it takes time, right? When an asteroid is newly discovered, to find out what its orbit truly is. And then it hit the media, and I was like, ugh. And I haven't written about it to correct people, to say, because Apophis back, the other one was Apophis back when, which was a fascinating discovery. But then this is the great thing, right? You see the stuff online and you think, oh, great. But then, NPR does it right. Newly found asteroid has a very small chance of hitting Earth, NASA says. By the way, one of the things that I really dislike when I read things, whenever I always go, is when people say NASA says. NPR I trust, but the Daily Mail, for example, NASA says, some other news organizations, I leave unnamed, will do the reporting and say NASA says. And that to me is a little alarm bell. That means they don't really know what they're talking about. And sometimes that's not the journalist's fault. Actually, oftentimes it's not, because not every organization has a science beat, as CBC does. And these poor journalists are thrown in here, take this story, cover this. And they don't know. So I do have some sympathy for these journalists who are thrown into this. Hey, put this out in an hour. So keep that in mind when you see this. But you know what? Again, as amateurs, there are comment sections, and you can very politely say, hey, this isn't actually accurate. This is what it is. Or offer to talk to the journalist. That's always a great thing to do. We know more than they do, really, for the most part, especially when it comes to just like general assignment reporters. So try not to be too cruel, because a lot of times it's not their fault. A lot of the times it's a younger journalist, and it's really, really hard on them. Before this was this. A piece of the sun broke off. And a little background story to this, I was approached by my producers who asked, hey, we're seeing a piece of the sun broke off. Well, I saw Tamitha Skov's tweet before news stories came out about it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Look at that. It's a polar vortex around. That's really cool. But the story kept circulating. And so my bosses came to me and said, oh, this is a story. I'm like, no, it's really not. I said, it's interesting, but it's not like, something weird is happening on the sun. The sun is always amazing and busy. And they trusted me. They trust me. And I said, okay. But the more and more I saw, the more and more annoyed I got. And so finally I was like, you know what? I am going to write a piece. And it was this. No, a piece of the sun didn't just break off. One of the interesting things that I noticed, all those stories started by Daily Mail, a lot of these stories didn't talk to Tamitha. So I reached out to Tamitha and we had an interview, and it was interesting because she said what she had thought was going to be more of a headliner would be polar vortex, because we had been going through a polar vortex, like it had descended. And she was stunned to find out that no, that was not what actually was what was interested, what the news of the day kind of picked up. It was the break off. And I wanted to clarify this for our readers and to, again, help them understand what actually did happen. And yeah, it is pretty cool, but not for the reasons that they necessarily thought. So another thing is, planetary conjunctions, as we call them, and talking about like Jupiter and Venus to join the evening sky on Wednesday. I wrote the story. What I think is interesting about this too, and a lot of it was Jupiter and Venus to kiss. Like, you don't need to, like, it's cool without having to do that stuff. But one of the fun things I like doing too is to tell people, okay, Jupiter and Venus are joining in the evening sky. They're going to come very close together. But you know what? Why not go out before they're at their closest? And why not go after? Because to me, what I think that people are interested in knowing and are surprised is that Jupiter and its moons. And I'm always like, hey, it's not just that they're going to be really close. It's also that you can watch Jupiter. This is a perfect time to let the public know, hey, if you have a pair of binos, go out night after night and you're going to see the moons move night after night. And people don't realize that. And I received emails about this saying, thank you, I had no idea. So they were more interested in, Jupiter and the orbits of the 4 brightest moons, as opposed to the joining, which I thought was really interesting. The other thing is talking about, a lot of times, and we've heard this before, and I did see some news stories about this, where people were calling in to police departments and saying, there's something bright in the sky. Oh my God, I can't. And that's something that's really important to me too, to tell people, yeah, that thing you see in there, that's explainable, or one of the other things that I think, again, as amateurs that we do is to tell people, passes iridium flares. I mean, you still get, I've seen 2 even since they were taken down or whatever deorbited in. And even last night, I was outside and I saw this really bright satellite flare. I still haven't looked it up though. I have to remember what time it was so I can check heavens above. And you can explain to people that this is what it actually is. And I had, for example, a neighbor message me last night, and it was a Daily Mail story. It was, 5 planets will be visible in the sky. And I was like, hey. And it was, of course, Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. And then they talked about Uranus and Mercury. And I said, and my neighbor said, is this true? And I said, it is, but you'd be hard pressed to see, as just a guy with no binoculars or anything, to see Mercury without really trying, or especially Uranus. So it's always good to put yourself out there, to let your friends and neighbors know, hey, you know what, I might have the answer. I might not, but I'll find out for you. And that's always what is really important to me, is doing that, is to be that voice. So now, I'll step away my day-to-day life and talk about elevating voices, because I screwed up on that, to be honest, and not doing that. And I will explain why and how. But I really think it's important for us as members of the RASC, we are, the go-to people at elevating voices. So I mentioned about Paul Mortfield, and I started getting into astrophotography This is the Northern Lights. Couldn't really see it naked eye from Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. So I started, that's a plane going by. And I lived in that apartment right there. And I went to this nice park, tried to set up the camera because I knew that it was a KP5 or something like that, or 6, and the camera could pick it up. I also did the transit of Venus, but Paul Moorfield, you know, I was lamenting the fact that it's very cloudy, obviously, in the winter, and he suggested I do remote astrophotography, which is itelescope.net. Yes, net. I always forget the extension. And I started doing remote astrophotography because they have telescopes at the time in Australia, which to me, I was like, wow, southern targets, because that was fascinating for me because I didn't really know a lot of them. I mean, seen them in pictures. New Mexico and Spain. They've added California, Arizona, I think. If they've added, I can't remember now how many they have. That's the bottom one that you see of the Horsehead Nebula. And I included this one because that was the better one I had done. The initial one, I did do a comparison on Flickr because the first one wasn't that great. And that's how I spent my New Year's Eve in 2012, was playing with this camera. And I just fell in love with it. I took my own. So this is a tarantula taken from Australia, but I also did my own stuff, you know, Earthshine. It was really funny because I was really annoyed by that crane being there. And I was like, no, actually, that kind of frames it nicely. And then the eclipse, which was, please remember I'm from Toronto, but it was freezing here. It was -20. Stop laughing. It was really cold here and it was awful. I had to like take my camera out. I had to put like the hand warmers around the battery so it wouldn't die because the wind chill was even worse. Run in, let the camera warm up and my cell phone will go back out and take these pictures. And so I was really interested in astrophotography. But one day, Katrina Ince, who's from the Toronto Center, mentioned to me, she said, you know, why aren't there more images from women in the journal? And I was like, oh my God. And that's how I failed. Like, she is absolutely right. So I sent out this tweet. And at the time, for me, this was huge. I only had by the way, yeah, I spelled astrophotographers wrong. I was too really excited. But I had like not a lot of followers compared to now. To me, it blew up. 848 likes, 281 retweets. I woke up in the morning and I was like, what the heck? My phone is just going crazy. And I got so many amazing astrophotography, photographs from women. And I was so amazed. And I have now turned that into my goal for every day operation. Like, for example, with the journal. Unfortunately, you're very small, but this is pen and pixel, you know, in the journal, showcasing astronomy photos from astrophotographers. And of those 4, 3 of them are from women. And I honestly don't think, this is last December, I don't think we've ever had that, ever. And I thank Katrina for that, for pointing that out to me, because wow, I think one's Caitlin Beecroft, another one's Andrea Gironis from Ottawa. Well, she's from Ottawa. I think she's unattached. Beecroft and Sheila Witcher. I can't pretty sure. Sorry, I'm old and I can't even read my own slides here. But and then there's one more, and I was just like, yes, and that has been my goal. Let me tell you, stay tuned for the 2024 Almanac. There are even more from women. There were tons to begin with, but that made me realize that I was failing at elevating voices. And then, you know, I also, with CBC, I did a Black in Science special, more of a general thing of how, you know, we were pushed down as I don't want to say race because race is a social construct, but we have been in sciences and astronomy and astronomers and astrophysicists. I followed up by an article just, I think it was last year, last June. This Black in Science special won an award for which I am so grateful. The 2021 Kavli Science Journalism Award from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which I'd always dreamed of. Yeah, that was my end goal, and I'm so flattered. It was a radio special for Quirks and Quarks, and I'm humbled to have won that award along with my colleagues. That was not my pitch. That was from a producer, and they asked if I would be interested. And I was like, yes. So I really think it's up to us to also elevate those voices, you know, because there aren't really Black astronomers. There aren't many people of color that are really represented in astronomy. And, you know, that's a history, and we can change that. And, you know, by the way, one of the things people are like, well, how come you didn't put Neil deGrasse Tyson in my analysis piece there? And I'm like, because he's not actually researching. Like, sorry, he's a great, he was a great. I think he was great in the past, more with astronomy. I think more he does more day-to-day things, but was a fantastic voice, and he's come through his life. It's been fantastic in communicating astronomy. And then there's Searching Beyond the Stars. I was approached, by the way, I hate pictures of myself, and I'm like showing you literally a picture of me with no makeup or whatever, but that was the day I received my author copies. This was a labor of love. It took many, many years to do this book and many, many sleepless nights. And I'll tell you the background story. The background story very briefly is that I was approached and asked if this was after Hidden Figures, and they said, we were interested in doing a kid's book, you know, adult book on that topic. And then they said, well, you know what, when we met again, they said, yeah, it's been done. A lot of people are doing it. And I said, well, why don't we talk about the women now, not the women in the past? So I profiled 6, 7. Now I don't know. It's been, like I said, it's been a labor of love. Ashley Walker is amazing. She started Black and Astro on Twitter, and it's actually its own page now, talking about her research, and she does some amazing stuff in with moons, which I can't wait for us to head off to Europa, and hopefully Enceladus. And she's really focused there. Of course, Tanya Harrison and Emily Lakdawala is all women who are researching now and what they're doing and how they're contributing to astronomy. And then, of course, we have the Night Sky Almanac. I am so amazed and humbled again to be bringing this information to amateurs, people, newbies. You know, I give it up. I have a young girl across the street. I think she's 11 now, but I bring my telescope out, and I've brought my telescope out, and, you know, tried to share it with people, neighbors, during the pandemic. Obviously there was NeoWise, and I had my binoculars out, and people were like, what are you looking at? Are you trying to, because I saw people try to look for it, and, you know, it wasn't that visible, especially from Toronto. And I said, no, here, and I let them see it, and they were like, oh, that's not as bright as I thought it would be. I'm like, I know. But, you know, it's still, they were like, wow, that is still pretty amazing. And of course, are also, there's ZTF Comet of Late, which I was fortunate enough to see. But I really love the fact that I can bring these books, or give these books, provide this information with the help of my colleagues at the RASC, who've helped me with this, and also our amazing illustrator, who's actually a CBCer as well. And I think it's amazing to be able to do this. And I'll tell you why. Because it adds to, again, Firefly is the publisher. And I'm going to try not to get teary here, but to the books that helped shape me, mainly Night Watch, and I didn't talk about that in the beginning because I wanted to leave it to the end. Night Watch was absolutely a game changer for me. I read Terence Dickinson's columns in the Toronto Star every weekend when I was, you know, a teenager, and I looked forward to that every weekend. That was it. I ran down, opened it up, read it. Night Watch was everything. Simplified star charts, etc. Backyard Astronomer's Guide. I mean, I got that book and just thought, oh my God, I want to do this. I want to get these amazing telescopes. And I have it in Hubble's universe. And I remember exploring the night sky to my former mother-in-law because she was intrigued by my love of the cosmos. And I'm flattered to have my books added to that. Terence Dickinson meant a lot to me. I interviewed him. I sent him a letter, an old-fashioned letter, after I graduated journalism school. And I said, I'd really love to talk to you about your work in astronomy. And he wrote me a lovely, lovely letter back and said, absolutely, here's my phone number. I called him and we talked on the phone for an hour and a half, 2 hours. This was a man I idolized and held up. It was amazing. It's like now I'm flattered to work with David Levy, somebody I also idolized. And I consider myself very fortunate to be in this universe. And I just wanted to end by remembering Terry. And I'm going to try not to cry because I think he meant a lot to all of us. And thank you to Alan Dyer for everything, for working with Terry as well, and for all he's done. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nicole, for such a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Nicole. I'm gonna turn it over for questions now. I see for the people who are online, if you have any questions, just put it into the Q&A. And then for the people here, just raise your hand and we'll answer your question. Just want to remind you that we've got a raffle for sale out there. We're going to do the draw around 9 o'clock. And the 50-50 that we've been having all month, the sales then for that at 9 p.m. So there's information out at the table for if you're interested in that. But let's get to our first question. And Nicole, do you keep an observing journal?
You know what? I don't anymore, but I do have my original observing journal, and I feel bad. The first time, so I told you I didn't have a telescope. Actually, my first telescope I got when I was 30 years old. It was my ex-father-in-law who gave it to me because he knew I was so interested in astronomy, and it was Meade refractor, and so then I upgraded to Nexstar 6 SE, and that's when I finally started doing an observer's journal. And I still have it here right over there on the shelf, where I sketched what I saw. And one of the first things that I was so thrilled, two things, was the Ring Nebula that I found on my own, not using the computer, and the Sagittarius star cloud. And I still have pencil drawings of that. And I really should get back to that. Thanks for asking me.
Great question. Anybody here have any questions for Nicole? Just put up your hand and we can. Yes.
Does she have an opportunity to interview the young girl from Canada who's driving the rover in Mars?
Oh, have you had the opportunity to interview the woman who is doing the Mars or the Mars rover? Is that right?
No, I haven't. I believe CBC did do something on that, and that's the reason why I didn't, because someone else had actually done that. But I'm actually looking forward to doing more about that, because I think that's absolutely amazing. And also, of course, our lunar rover that is going to be absolutely stunning. But I know who you're talking about. No, I did not. She's amazing.
Awesome. We have a question online. What can we do as local RASC chapters to elevate the voices in our diverse society today?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, it's so important, I think, is to make everybody understand that everybody is welcome at the RASC. And the other thing is to include them in everything that you do. Outreach, speakers, that is how you get to elevate those voices. Because a lot of times, the thing is too, a lot of times people feel like, oh, maybe they don't have enough knowledge, or maybe they don't belong, or maybe they shouldn't say anything, and they might feel intimidated. But the most important thing is to make people feel welcome, and let them know that their voice is important and it matters. You matter. That t-shirt, like, and so it's really important to let people know that, and do that. And for example, JRASC, we've historically not had a lot of diversity, and most recently, I included the voices of young Arthi Nath Arushi, I should say, and her work on the DART mission. She's like, they're 13 and 11 now. No, 13 and 16. And they're really big players in the Toronto Centre, and they are invited to speak all the time. So just invite them to speak.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. We have a question here.
I just thought I would point out that 2 of her books are currently available in this library right now. I've got one of them on hold, but her Searching Beyond the Stars, there are 8 copies in the Calgary Public Library system.
Oh, that's great. So Nicole, we just wanted to let you know that here at the Calgary Public Library, there are copies of 2 of your books in circulation, and yeah, that's awesome. Thanks
Great.
for
Thank you.
pointing that out.
Yeah.
And we do have Nicole's Almanac at the back if you want to grab a copy as well.
Just wrapping up 2024, so it's off to the publisher soon.
Awesome. What are your thoughts on UAPS, unidentified aerial phenomenon?
Yeah. So here's my thing about that. I think, okay, I'll tell a little story. Jill Tarter, SETI researcher, and at the forefront of that, she told a story on Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Somebody asked her a question, have you ever seen a UFO? And she said, she went and told the story how she and her husband were flying in their little plane, and she kept seeing this bright light following them, and she was like, nah, it can't be anything. But the more and more she looked at it, she thought, this is weird. And she said to her husband, this light is constantly following us. And she soon realized that she was looking at the moon. And I figure if she can mistake something for a UFO or a UAP, any of us can. But I find that most things are explainable. I do believe very much so that there is life out there. I don't necessarily believe that life has visited us yet, but I think most things are explainable. I've seen, for example, a meteor coming at me face on, which was the weirdest thing. And it took me a bit to realize what it was. I actually had that happen on the plane ride home, on my plane ride home last 2 Sundays ago, where that happened. I was like, what is that? And then I realized it was a meteor, but at the wrong direction. So I think most things are explainable. I'm not saying that I'm not open-minded, but I think most things are explainable. I mean, as astronomers, how many of us have seen things that we legitimately cannot explain? And that's my feeling, but I am open to it. I'm never going to be closed-minded about anything.
Awesome. Any questions here in the live audience? Right, I'll take another one online. Would you provide some insight into your research for the Night Sky Almanac?
Yeah, it takes a lot of, the initial, it's really interesting. The first book was the hardest because it was a lot about, looking at sky charts, using the apps to try and figure out what was up in the night sky. Obviously on as well, the front matter, talking about eclipses in general, and the moon and all the front matter stuff. That was a little bit easier for me because I've been writing about that for a long time. It was the month by month stuff that was a little harder, especially in the beginning. But fortunately, year after year, the sky doesn't change all that much. The stars and the constellations don't change that much. It's the planets. And it's really tricky because sometimes I'm really afraid that I might miss something. And that's why I have vetters. We have expert reviewers. Dave Chapman has done it in the past for the first 3. And Chris and James Edgar as well. And this year, Dave Chapman has stepped away, unfortunately, but Chris Vaughn from Toronto Centre has stepped in. And I rely, any journalist, any writer relies on expert other eyes to make sure that things aren't missed. And I do absolutely trust them with that. But it was very much a lot of research on a lot of using the Observer's Handbook, for example, using things like Stellarium and what's the other app? Not Star Walk, the other one, Sky Safari, and things like that, and using the NASA. So that was a lot, months and months of work, and now it's a little bit easier, but still takes a lot of work, but it's fun.
Cool. Yes, question at the one in the front first and then the back. Yes, please.
Message that one might give to new astronomers to make it immediately relevant to them?
Okay, great question. So what would you say to new astronomers to make it immediately relevant to them?
To make the
Astronomy.
immediate. It's amazing. That's my whole thing, and that's why I love doing outreach even here at home and bringing my telescope out and basically saying our universe is absolutely mind-blowing. And by the way, you can see a lot of stuff if you want to. One of my favorite things, it's happened, I've seen it twice. Once at the DDO, where we turned one of the amateur telescopes to Saturn. And the person jumped back and then walked to the front of the telescope. And she said, I thought you had a sticker stuck there, because she didn't really believe that we could see Saturn like that. And then I saw it at the North York Astronomical Associations in Ontario and Toronto at their Star Party, Starfest. Same thing happened. I happened to be walking by someone and the person did the same thing and was looking at the front and said almost the exact same thing. So honestly, we can share our enthusiasm and our passion for everything that's out there, including the sun. And you guys have the Northern Lights, man. I'm so jealous about that. I know it was KP6 last night, so I don't know how many people got to see it, but definitely not from Toronto. But to let people know just how amazing and how strange our universe seems to be, with black holes, with binary stars and emergers and things like that. That was kind of really cool about the gravitational wave detection. People got really interested in that for a short time, but just to show people what is out there and tell them that they can be involved and that they don't need to know everything. They can learn along the way, as we all did.
Great, thank you. We'll take one online and then we'll go back to in person. If you ever had the opportunity to go into space, would you?
Yes. That's just good. Yes. I actually tried to apply for the SpaceX private launch to the moon, or to orbit the moon. I did not win, sadly. But yeah, I absolutely would. Though with my health problems, I probably wouldn't be chosen. So heart issues.
Awesome. I'm guessing you're not going to go into that giant Bok globule of nothingness.
Yeah, no.
Anytime
no.
soon. Okay.
Depends on how annoyed I get with people here, like in the city.
Just
wanna
send them there. You can
Yeah,
send them there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A question at the back.
Did the RC could or may consider to do some lobbying to influence in all Canada the science curriculum to include inside science astronomy? We learn the Earth, but we don't teach our the kids to keep your heads up.
Mhm.
Is it possible the RC can do this kind of lobbying? Because many provinces start to build their curriculum, and I think it's maybe a good timing to do this influence.
So the RASC influencing the
Yes,
curriculum?
yes.
Nicole, so the question is, can our RASC do anything to help influence the curriculum at schools? It seems like a lot of the provinces across the country, they don't spend too much time on astronomy. And while with astronomy being a great gateway science to other ones, it'd be a boon to the system. And, we have an army of 5,000 volunteers who would be more than willing to go into schools. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that would have to come from on high, but I think it'd be great. I have been asked, and I have spoken at schools, including my daughter's way back when she was learning astronomy, and that was mainly I think it was grade 6 for her in Ontario. It might be 5 or 6. My sister is a teacher, and I've spoken at her school. She doesn't teach that, but I've spoken at her school, and I was supposed to do it last year as well. So yes, even if RASC, doesn't try and influence it necessarily, just offer yourselves to the schools. But I do agree that astronomy, it's funny. A lot of people are like, wow, like in the beginning, they'd be like, you're a scientist. I'm like, no, really not. Um, and it's funny because I didn't take physics in high school. It scared the heck out of me. I didn't, I'm terrible at math, terrible at it. Which is why I went into science journalism too, because I was like, well, I don't need to know the math, but I can still, you know, uh, communicate that knowledge that is out there. But my father was really upset with me for not taking physics or not taking science after grade 10. I did take biology, but it's a long story. But I to this day, I'm like, if you had told me, hi, physics is astronomy, I probably would have taken it. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'm 50 and the curriculum was far different back when, but I really do think that, teaching, and hopefully with, now we're seeing a return to the moon, talking about going to Mars, perhaps that will be the impetus. Maybe it doesn't have to come from us, but perhaps that will be the impetus to get provincial, authorities to try and include more of that in schools. Little story, I'm a big Pluto lover. Most people, well, I don't know if people here know that, there know that, but people in Toronto do. And my daughter was in school, and she came home and she said, "Mom, my teacher just told me that Pluto was once a star but got demoted." And I was like, "What?" And so I had parent teacher night, and I was like, "Yeah, by the way," and of course they backtracked. They were like, "No, we never said that." But I had a bunch of her friends tell me the same thing. And so, just offer ourselves up. Say, you know what? We'd love to talk about astronomy, especially to elementary school age children. That's where it was fostered for me, and I'm sure for so many others.
Definitely. No, that's fun. I've had the opportunity to do that for
Oh, that's
grade
great.
6. So
Yeah.
much fun. Let's go to another question online. This one I want to know an answer to as well, because it's happened to me more than one, probably more than a dozen times. What would you do if you told someone a story? What would you do if you told someone a story they believed was misinformation and they refused to accept it?
Welcome to my life. So, especially with climate change, I do a lot of climate change reporting. So, this is the thing. You can't make someone believe something. You can't. All you can do is present them with the facts. I'm looking at my window because my neighbor believes in UFOs. And I've tried to tell him, like, no, that wasn't a UFO. That was actually, a satellite that flared or whatever. And he may not believe it. And that's okay. I mean, not happy about it, but what I do is I present the facts, and I can give them, for example, websites to go to. So, for example, I'm writing a piece coming out on Monday about climate change because the Intergovernmental Panel on IPCC on climate change is releasing their report. And I'm writing something for Monday talking about just about the 1.5 degrees warming, et cetera. And Berkeley Earth has this great website, and it has a skeptic's guide to climate change. And they address and they provide, pardon me, all the facts and address the questions that people will say. So how do you know that the climate has changed, et cetera? Now, translating that to astronomy, you say, how do you know that wasn't a UFO? And you can say, well, here's heavens above, here's a satellite, here's what it is. I had people tweet me about the Starlink train from southwestern Ontario, asking what it was, and I knew what she was implying, and I said, no, this is Starlink. Here's here's what it was, and she thanked me for it. So if people are willing to be open-minded, they're willing to be open-minded. If they're going to be closed-minded, there's nothing you can do to change that, but present them with the facts. That's it. And you can't engage in an argument with them. That is a losing battle. Absolutely.
Cool. No, thanks for that input. Anybody here have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask you about what kind of apps or software do you use in your career related to astronomy? And if you could one day build your own app, what would it be?
Perfect. No, that's a great question, and it correlates to the question that's also online. What apps do you like to use that you find the most useful? And if one day you could create your own app, what would it look like?
So when it comes to just general apps, so Stellarium I use all the time. It's easy, simple. Sky Safari. But one of the simpler ones on your phone that I've provided numerous neighbors with is Starwalk. Starwalk. There are two, Starwalk and Skywalk. But that, because I love that you can, like, if you look at my phone, for example, I have just a folder of space stuff. And, I have the NASA, I have, the sky the clear sky chart, sky view, that was it, aurora alerts, the moon, aurora, I can't read that, I'm too old, Jupiter moons, the moon, Sky Live, Sky Safari Pro, space weather, and the Mars images, because they're downloaded from the rovers, which I love. So I have a variety, but when it comes to, for example, like the night sky, Sky Safari is great. But there's so many out there, honestly, that are really great. But some of the other ones that I like I said, the Mars imagers, they have images that come down directly from Curiosity and Perseverance. Yeah. And back when OPI. But if I could design an app, geez, that's a good question. I don't know. That is a really good question. I really love seeing what our spacecraft see, for example. That is something that fascinates me, and that we're so fortunate. I mean, can you imagine telling our grandparents that we would be seeing Mars images from Mars live, or raw images from Juno, or from back when Cassini? I think that would be something I would love to see, because you're there. It takes you there, so far away from home. I think that probably would be.
Cool. Are there any? Are there, just kind of expand on the question that was from the chat? What about apps that will notify you if there's something really cool going down in the sky? Space
weather is really good for that, for aurora
Yes.
alerts, for example. And I'm trying to think. There's another one. I also like Space Weather Live, and that's mostly the sun stuff and the aurora stuff happening. Another app I really like is Helio Viewer. It's on desktop, and I've been tweeting movies from that, where you can see the newest images from various satellites that are orbiting. And Helio Viewer is amazing. I am in love with it, especially now during the maximum. During the minimum, I wasn't, you know, you're kind of bored, but not bored, but and you can see the flares and you can see the prominences and the filaments. So that is one of my absolute favorites. It doesn't give you notifications, but I just like going to it every day and seeing. But honestly, space weather has been. I think I've been using space weather for 20 years. I think it was during that picture where I set that Aurora picture, where I showed you that Aurora picture, my sister, because I've actually influenced her. She's 8 years younger than me. And one of the things I did was I took her to the Comet Shoemaker-Levy impact, and she kind of got on board. And she was the one who taught me about space weather.
That's cool. It's
That's
definitely one of my favorites too.
yeah.
That's cool. Any other questions here? Right. Well, that's it for questions. And Nicole, I just want to express my appreciation on behalf of the Calgary Centre of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. We're very grateful that you were here with us this evening to give such a great talk, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you so very much.